different. It's actually Halloween day, so it makes it kind of interesting. So the first thing we're going to do is just mention the card that we looked at a few weeks ago, the Fool. And just to remind ourselves, that was the first card in the tarot deck. And this is about going through the tarot deck is about the adventures of the Fool. And the Fool is actually you on your adventure. It's wrapped in the protection of the universal life force, that's the robe that it's wearing, and carries the white rose of purified action. So he also has this friendly, obedient companion, represented by the little dog, and that's the intellect. This is to remind us the intellect is not supposed to be running the show, but obedient to the inner self. Also, we have him surrounded by what we call an egg of light, and that means the undeveloped potential about to begin another journey in the valley of experience. So he also is carrying, along with him, all the information from prior adventures in the satchel, hanging off the wand. And I also want to mention that he's not going to fall off the cliff, because as long as he keeps his gaze up, which in the occult means within, then everything will be fine. So I just wanted to reiterate the Fool card, just kind of get a glance at it, remembering that there's yellow in the background, so that when you see the Magician key, you'll see some similarities of consciousness, because this particular figure is, I'm going to ask Robert to stop typing.
I could mute him for now.
Okay, thank you, because it's a little distracting. All right,
That's not me.
Oh, somebody. Okay, so the Fool's first stop is the Magician key, and this is key 1, and it shows the tools that he's going to be picking up and using along his journey, and those are on the table. And this is actually the first point of duality. So therefore, whereas the Fool card was male and female equally, we are now looking at a male masculine magician. So he's in the midst of a green garden of roses, red roses and white lilies, and they represent the subconscious mind. Just to remind you, there are 3 characters in this deck and in this story. And the masculine represents the self-conscious plane of mental activity. So this is the wide-awake you, that which directs what's going on in your life. And therefore, the primary message and function of this key is attention, beginning, and concentration. The key is at the beginning. His attention is very purposeful, and concentration is the other function of this key. And just to remind everyone that when we are working on understanding what's going on within ourselves, we also have to remember that we must develop concentration before we delve into meditating. The next card, the next slide, is about the colors. And I'm going to reiterate the color symbology as I did when we were covering the Fool card. So the first color you see predominant is yellow, and this again stands for mental equilibrium and the intellect. It represents air and light, and the alchemical Mercury, which is when we use the term alchemical, we mean we're bringing it in line with the chakras. So the alchemical Mercury is found at the very top of the head, at the crown. And so it's representative of superconsciousness. So we're basically, the consciousness of this card is basically the same as it was with the Fool. He's just stepped into starting his adventure. So we're still at that point. He's still operating at the same level of consciousness. He's wearing a white robe. And this again means purity, primal light, and pure spirit. This is the undergarment. And this is what he needs in order to do the work, is to have within himself purity of spirit. His headband is white, and it is holding back his black hair, which symbolizes ignorance and inertia. So he's starting to get motivated. The lilies represent pure thought and divine love, and he's directing his attention to his garden. We'll get into more detail in the next few cards. So red, his robe, means action, courage, strength, and physical energy. This is the conscious plane of mental activity. He's wearing a red robe, which represents his desire nature. The magic that he does consists of what he can do just by wanting to do it. He's the doer. But in order to accomplish anything, he has to put on his red robe. And it also activates the implements, the tools that he's going to be picking up. He has yet to pick them up. The red roses of human love and desire for action are in the garden that he's creating. And just to remind us, we are the beings that are the mediator between our inner and outer aspects of life. And these are all exercised through our desire nature. Without your desire nature, none of you would be here listening to me explain this to you. So now green means growth, increase, harmony of nature, and planet Venus. So that's the symbology of it, and you have to remember that green takes the sunlight and makes it into growth. So most of the planet is covered with green plants, most of the planet Earth. And stems and leaves indicate growth, so that's easy to remember. And then we have the serpent, and we'll go into more detail about the serpent later. The serpent is swallowing its tail, which is wrapped around his waist. So whenever you see this symbol, it means eternity and regenerative force. So you're seeing a lot of things that have to do with growing, regeneration, reproduction. He's the second card, so we're now, the force and energy is coming into duality. It comes into major duality, major multiplication when we get to the Empress card. But right now we're just stepping our foot into the garden. So he not only has a symbol of eternity around his waist, but he's also symbolizing the regenerative forces. Brown is the earthly nature. His table or trestle board is brown, and his implements are sitting on this table. Now, where does this word trestle board come from? And it's a very ancient term, but it actually describes a particular table where designs or blueprints are made. It's just not an ordinary table. It's, if you were an architect or an engineer, you would be working on a trestle board. You are designing for the future, basic designs. So that's the concept behind calling it the trestle board. The wand. Now let's take a look at the wand that he's holding in his right hand of power. It's hollow, but it has a bud at the top. Again, regeneration. But this is also a recognition that all the power that we use comes from the reality of the universe. So he's holding up his hand to signify, his right arm, to signify that this is where everything comes from. It's not from him, it's from source, from within, because up always means within. It's most interesting that a few of my very favorite pictures of Jesus Christ show him with his right arm up and his right hand up, and his left hand over his heart. I have a picture like that. It'd be nice to say photo. I have a picture like that over my altar. So it's carried on throughout the ages. There's a recognition of this symbol of the right hand being up. It's also, this particular wand is a phallic symbol. So it represents the life force is the most powerful force we know. And that's the reason it also has the bud at the top. So sublimation of the reproductive forces thereby allows his will to be used as a hollow channel for the will of God. So he's saying, not my will, but thy will be done. And he's drawing this power down, and he's directing it to the table, and he's using it to build the garden, which is a representative of the subconscious mind. The serpent is called an Ouroboros. The serpent swallowing its tail is a symbol, as we talked about, of eternity and regenerative force. Thereby, he accepts eternity as the framework within which he works. It's wrapped around him and encloses him in his pure white garment. That's a real interesting concept, because many people do not believe in reincarnation in the Western world, yet this is a Western story. If you were in India, I believe they even, besides understanding reincarnation, they also have little societies that talk about how to work with reincarnation, how to work with your prior lives. So in the West, we've sort of tossed this out, but we must remember it again, because the Kabbalah was used as the framework of the tarot, and this comes from the Kabbalah, though you may hear that many Jews, they too do not believe in reincarnation. But if they got back to their roots, they'd find out that's there, full-fledged. Same with the Christians. It's in the New Testament. So his framework means he accepts eternity. And that really frees you up consciously if you dwell on that. It's a good meditation. The figure 8 over his head means eternity also. He's crowned by eternity. So here we have the tools. And they represent fire, water, air, and earth. The white wand is fire, which signifies will. The cup is signifying water. It's the silver chalice of imagination and knowing. So remember, he's not picked these up, but imagination and knowing, you need those to create. The steel sword is air, and it's the sword of daring and formation. So I always remember that it's air, because when you have a sword in your hand, you whip it around in the air, and it'll be easy to remember that symbol. The coin is earth, and it's the silent coin of dense materialization, because the earth is very quiet until we all sit around and yak and talk, etc. But if you go into a park, it's silent. The earth is silent. The animals talk, the critters talk, we talk, but the earth is silent. The five-pointed star, the pentagram, symbolizes man's dominion over all the powers of nature, the four elements, with the upper point being the spirit of man. This is to remind us that the coins in the world mean material success. The pentacle represents spiritual success. And the difference between the pentagram and the pentacle is the pentagram is the five-pointed star, and the pentacle is the five-pointed star within a circle. And there it sits in front of you. There are four worlds also represented by these four tools, and we need to learn them with the magician, as we become the magician, in a particular order. This is the order of creation. Energy moves in a path a particular path through these four worlds. The white wand is the archetypal world of ideas. The cup is the creative world of forms. The steel sword is the formative world of mechanics, and the coin is the world of result, where we live. So what does this mean? If you were going to create a chair, the first thing you would do is go concept, chair. Remember, this is in your mind. Then you go, particular chair. Do I want a stone chair, wood chair, shape, particular shape? The formative world of mechanics is coming up, taking that particular chair and starting to put it together. And the coin is, I have a chair to sit on. There it is. I've created it. So there are four ways that you, not ways, but four methods of moving into having a chair, having a result. And as we study the tarot, and we get to the hanging man card, where he's hanging upside down and his hands are behind his back. He's no longer using his hands. It's called a card of illumination. He's just using his mind to create. Not even using. We have developed as humans an incredible repertoire and ability to create with our hands. But the reality is we create with our minds. And we have to return to that state and understand it. And therefore, energy moves in a particular path through these four worlds of creation. And it's something to think about. So the four occult admonition, I can never say this, are to will, to know, to dare, to be silent. And they're each represented by the wand, the cup, the sword, and the coin. So we need to cultivate will and accumulate knowledge. To dare means action. You have to put on that red robe in order to do anything. And once you set about what you're going to accomplish in your life, it's best to keep it to yourself and be quiet. So these four tools have many meanings. To will, to know, to dare, to be silent. So here we are at death, and that's the letter of this, the Hebrew letter of this card, and it means house. There's a little house. Its numerical value is 2, first point of duality. Remember, the card itself is number 1 on the deck because the full card is 0. So the numbering between the cards and the numbers signified by the letters are 1 off, and we always have to remember that. But so it allows for a little more understanding of what each card signifies. So this is really the first card of the deck because the Fool is everywhere, but is also the first point of duality because of Beth. In this card, Beth means a dwelling place for the self, the temple of the living God. So that's who we are. The magician represents your house of personality through which the spirit of your own true self expresses itself. We're not talking about the vehicle you walk around in. We're still at this higher consciousness. Remember the yellow background in the card. So we're talking about your personality. We're made in the image of God. We are very much the same, but we all have developed different personalities based on all those little items we've stored away in the satchel that we carry along with us. So every single being on this planet is different, is a different personality. And every single being needs to learn how they individually can express themselves and express the will of God through themselves, through their own personality. So the high magic of all of this is the transmutation of your personality from its lower forms of expression into a conscious temple of the Holy Spirit. which is really cool. So we're at the midpoint. If anyone has any questions, then we're going to move on to the High Priestess.
I'm just unmuting people, so if anyone has a question or a comment. No? Okay. Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm hoping people are getting it. It's a lot it's a lot of information, and
it's a lot to take in, yeah.
And it's all about you. So the idea is to take it in and kind of see, how does this work in my life? And now we're going to get to the High Priestess.
Oh wait, Margot.
Oh, yeah.
This is Sarah.
Okay.
I have a question about the stars, the pentagrams. Could you explain that again?
Okay, the pentagram is a 5-pointed star. And the 4 elements, fire, air, earth, and water, are the 4 points. The 5th point is the human spirit, is the spirit of man. Our spirit, not, yeah, you could say human spirit, man's spirit. So the essence of it's called a quintessence. It's the pentagram represents the human, the man's spirit taking the 4 elements and raising them up, because he's the point that's at the top. So it's called, it's a quintessence. The pentacle is taking that same 5-pointed star and putting a circle around it, and that's on the coin. So that becomes the coin. And the terms are pretty much interchangeable. You'll see a lot of symbology with the pentacle, but the pentagram is just the star. And it's also representative of the microcosm. The macrocosm is the 6-pointed star. That's the law, the 2 triangles of the law. One you can see, and it's at our altars. We have what's called law triangles. And what you can see are the 3 there in front of you. But the other 3 are at a higher rate of vibration, and they also exist in the chapel, crossing over. So you have a 6-pointed star that we walk into and stand in the midst of when we're at the altar. And that's the macrocosm. So the microcosm is the 5-pointed star, is the quintessence. It's man taking the 4 elements, fire, air, earth, and water, and raising them up into the will of God, using them for the will of God.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So onward to the High Priestess. This is a lady we really need to get to know. She's very important. She's a virgin in this card, but everything that's multiplied and happens comes from this point. So we've seen the conscious mind, and she's the major representation of the subconscious mind. So the Fool's second stop is to become the High Priestess, to immerse she, him, itself, the self, into this and understand how it works. The magician shows the tools that he'll be picking up to use along his journey. Key 2, it's interesting, this is 2, is where he learns about the soul and the subconscious plane of mental activity and how it works. The High Priestess is the subconscious, feminine element that responds to the masculine self-consciousness of the magician key. There must be an exchange between these 2 for anything to happen. And if anybody has seen the Tree of Life, at the top there's a triangle. And we use it in Christianity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. In the Tree of Life at the top, you have the male, female at the top, Kether, and to the right, you have the conscious mind, and to the left at the top, you have the subconscious mind. Without those 2, nothing exists below. The 7 Sephira, or emanations of God, would be non-existent unless the power that's coming through the conscious mind, from the will of God, through the conscious mind on the right, throws itself over to the subconscious mind, and then everything starts multiplying. I used to say in my classes that if there were no High Priestess, if there were no subconscious mind, the conscious mind would just be throwing stuff out forever, to all eternity. It would just be going out, 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 out. It hits the High Priestess, and everything comes to a dead stop and breaks, and creation starts multiplying what's coming out of the conscious mind. So they're necessary. She also, in the Tree of Life on the left side, she's restriction, she's everything that's preserving. So let's see a little bit more about this. So the colors will indicate what's going on, again, in the card. So blue is water, memory, receptivity, and reflection. So that shows in this card, the planets are the moon and Jupiter of the card. So you see the moon on her crown. It also accounts for alchemical silver. And the subconscious plane of mental activity. She's got her eyes closed. Subconscious is also the agency of telepathic communication. Now, we'll get into a little more detail, but that's a good one, because if I recall, Father Paul used to tell us, you don't have to say a word, you just have to think things. And you're like a radio station sending out signals. And that's where he gets this from. This is, the subconscious is an agency of telepathic communication. Everything you think is radiating out. White, purity, primal life, pure spirit. The undergarment and fabric on her headdress is white. So again, purity of spirit is needed for this work, just like it was for the magician. The pillar on the right represents affirmation. And we'll get into the pillars specifically. Red, action, courage, strength, and physical energy. The conscious plane of mental activity. The pomegranates, female, on the veil. That's very interesting, because even though they're red, they're the feminine. The pomegranates are feminine, so they are active. The gray, a combination of white and black. Union of opposites and wisdom. The veil before the inner sanctuary. So you've got to get through her to get to the inner sanctuary. And the gray is opposites. You have green, the growth, increase, emotion, and desire. The ferns, male, on the veil. So it's interesting, the male aspect are the ferns, which are growth, but the active is red, which is the female. But they're both on the veil. So remember, these are opposites again. A lot of opposites in this card. Yellow, mental equilibrium and intellect. The floor beneath her feet. So she's resting on this point of everything being equal. And the intellect is beneath her feet, under control. Black, the primal matter, the occult unknown element earth. And interesting, the pillar on the left represents inertia and resistance. So you have the two pillars. The white pillar represents affirmation and has the letter Yod, which is the initial of Jochen, Father of Mary, on it. And right there, and it means the establishing principle. Fire representing will is on the top. So this is an active, positive pillar. The black pillar represents the negation of the activity, which is the establishing principle, and bears the letter Beth, initial of Boaz, husband of Ruth. For strength is rooted in resistance or inertia. You ever go to a gym and you see everyone's pulling weights and pushing, strength, building strength. Interesting. Resistance and inertia. Water is on top, representing the passive polarity. and also our tool, imagination and knowing. The two great pillars represent polarity in nature, which is the means of productivity. The Virgin sits between them to show that truth is found between opposite extremes. All action is rooted in the opposite of forces, whether physical or spiritual. So we need these forces, these two negative forces of extremes, in order to create. It's a polarity. Once you understand polarities, you move to the middle of them, and then you're able to get past the High Priestess into the inner sanctuary. The cubes. Okay, between these pillars sits the veiled entrance to the holy place of God. The High Priestess at each of the pillars sits on a cube, which I'm showing. You can see the little cubes. Pythagoras taught that the cube is a solid representation of earth, or material manifestation. So she's resting on this. These two pillars are resting on them. When I say resting, visualize the fact you're all sitting down on a chair. Somebody yanked the chair out from under you, you would not be resting on it. So there's a lot of your trust and faith, etc., in the chair you're sitting on right now, that it's not going anywhere. So think about the cube as being that. The basis of all subconscious mental activity is what has actually occurred, what actually exists. It's in the past, it's memory. The Hebrew double letter G, or Gimel, means camel, and it rules peace and strife. All the double letters in the Hebrew language have two meanings. So this has peace and strife. So you could say, if we remember ourselves, we have peace, and we're talking about the self within. If we forget, we have strife. Pretty obvious. Gimel, because it means camel, also is the letter name signifying travel and communication. The subconsciousness is also the agency of telepathic communication. We've already talked about that. So you have to be careful what you think, even. Gimel has the numerical value of 3. The High Priestess is the third point on the triangle. I already covered that. Personal subconsciousness is always amenable to control by suggestions which originate in the mental activity symbolized by the magician. The subconscious is the law of the universe, the scroll Torah in her lap. The whole point of our efforts is to try to manipulate this law from the level of the magician. She's the chief feminine elder. She's primary receptive, the primary receptive aspect of the life power. Astrologically, she represents the moon, and you can see the silver in the crown of the moon waxing, waiting in full. She corresponds to all the virgin goddesses of the ancient world. The nature of mind is represented by water. Water holds everything in solution, all possibilities. As the number 2 key, she's a symbol of duplication, reflection, copying, reproduction, as it relates to memory, the basic function of the subconscious mind. But it also suggests duplicity, deception, untruth, illusion, error, and delusion. Nasty stuff. So, she's a recording device. She records everything and repeats and elaborates all the mistaken results of faulty, superficial, self-conscious observation. She is uncritically amenable to suggestion. She's the channel of telepathic communication. What you think she will broadcast and multiply. She multiplies your observation ad infinitum, for better or worse, in your mind. Not necessarily in all the physical things going on around you. The water streaming from her robe is in all the streams and pools in the cards. The internet doesn't hold a candle to her memory. So, remember Krishna's advice from the Bhagavad Gita. Don't be fooled that you live in the physical plane. You receive input from the material, but live in the mind. The world around you is a mental creation. Something you can imagine is real. Mind is totally impressionable, thoughts have weight and value. There's a danger in being wrapped up in memory. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna told Arjuna that in order to get himself out of his karma, he needed to place his mind in a completely different direction from what bugged him and what pleased him. Krishna simply had Arjuna concentrate on Krishna. It cut the karmic stream. You concentrate on Jesus Christ, you concentrate on that which is perfect. And it will do this. The inner self will always urge you to find your own path. Get to know and understand the High Priestess in you. Many people go through years of trying to figure out how to fix things that happened in their past. Remember, the High Priestess multiplied anything and everything you've ever thought, done, experienced. You walk in a room, stuff in your peripheral vision, the High Priestess is recording. And she's then presenting it to you, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, in multiple ways. So how do you stop all this? You just turn and look at what's perfect. You can't stop it. It's like if you want to turn the light on in a room, you walk in and you flip the switch. You don't go to the corner, pick up a broom, and try and sweep it out. It is never going to work that way. You have to just look within and look for the light, and all the rest will go away. Because all the rest isn't real. It's just in your head. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Any questions?
Let me unmute folks here.
Hey, Margot, can you hear me?
Yes. Who's
Hi.
this?
Hi, this is Ann.
Oh, good.
Hi. Hey, I remember that time I was visiting you, you had a certain version of the Bhagavad Gita that you used in your classes.
Yes. I have like 4 versions, but the one I liked a lot was A Walkthrough for Westerners by Jack Hawley, Hawley. So the Bhagavad Gita, A Walkthrough for Westerners. It's well written and easy to follow for Westerners. Okay. There's also one that's, I actually met the author. It's more like a poem, and that's quite lovely. But of course, why would I have these books all together? Ah, here it is. And that one is by Stephen Mitchell, Mitchell. A new translation. And that one also is delightful. That's more like reading poetry. Stephen Mitchell. So these are 2, one by Jack Hawley and one by Stephen Mitchell. Those are both great for understanding that. And, it's the same that we teach, in the New Testament.
Okay, good. And then, is this webinar, can we come back to it later and go through it again?
Yes, I just recorded it. I recorded it, and it'll be available. You were going to find a new place to post it, right?
Yes, I'm going to be I'm creating a YouTube site for all of these.
Oh.
So I actually was given directions on how to do it, but I was a little busy this week. The woman who showed me, she showed me last week, and I was all excited and gung-ho, and then, of course, all my hours got filled up. So I'm very much looking forward to just putting these up on YouTube, at which point Cynthia will tell everybody where it is.
And then I have another question for Cynthia Ray.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to get to your webinar to listen, and it didn't work. So
the recording did not work?
Yeah, the recording did not. That's what I mean. The recording did not work.
Yes, there was a problem with that, so that we're trying to fix that. That was one of the first ones we recorded, so we're learning as we go here.
Okay.
And if I get mine up on YouTube, of course, we will put hers up too.
Okay, sounds good then.
Oh, and I have a question. This is Sarah.
Yes.
I'm not very computer savvy, so this is kind of a miracle that I've even gotten this far.
Oh, good.
But I don't have a picture of any of this. I do have my tarot book, so I've been following along. Is this visual?
Yes.
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry.
Did you come in on your computer?
Yes.
And so you should be able to see the
Nope.
picture.
What I see are people's names and that we're talking and that, but that's it. So I do have my book, but I was able to follow along that way, but I'm not sure what's going on.
I know. So is everyone else able to see?
Yeah. Sarah, did you follow the link? When you got the reminder that this class was happening from Cynthia, there was a link?
Yes.
And did you just, because I
click on it.
I just clicked on the link and everything.
That's all. Yep, that's all I did.
Okay. Well, you'll see it on YouTube then.
All right.
And the last pictures are a picture of Krishna and a picture of Krishna and Arjuna with the 4 horses. And also, I have pictures on my blog, which is at Gates of Light .wordpress.com.
WordPress.com? Okay.
Yes. So Gates of Light, GATES of LIGHT, .wordpress.com. So there's 2 dots in there.
Okay. Thank you.
So you'll see some pictures there. I used the Krishna picture there because I really like it. He just looks, if I go back, he just looks like everything's fine. Just look at me. It's just like very relaxed. It's like, don't get all carried away. Don't panic. It's all going to work out. And that's what we have to remember to do. That's you got to get a grip on the High Priestess. And the person who gets that grip is the magician. He's the one who tells the High Priestess what to multiply. And that's your conscious mind deciding where to focus. If it's, if it's out there, so to speak, then everything out there is multiplying. It's the music you listen to, the people you hang out with, the TV you watch, all of that is getting multiplied in your brain, and you think it's your thoughts. Scary. So you just have to be conscious that there's this thing going on, and then you go, well, what do I want to think about? What suits me? What works for me? What serves me? Not my neighbor, not my friends, not my parents, not my kids. What serves me? And then that's where you put your focus, and that's where you multiply. And with passion, with energy, that will give something more duplication than other things which just go right by you. My husband used to say when I would watch TV and I'd cover my eyes when something awful was going on, he goes, "It's just TV, Margot." And I go, "I can't deal with it." I just can't look. I have to close my eyes. I don't want that in my brain.
I know, because it's there forever.
Yeah, it's there forever. So you have to, you have to listen to Krishna and just look at Krishna. Or as we do, we contact Jesus Christ and go, "Here, I'm putting this on the altar. You can have it and throw it away. Thank you. Goodbye." Because he can do that.
Yeah, just a reminder to folks that on servantsoftheway.net, there's you can sign up for all the classes there, and the link to the blog is there, and links to other websites as well.
Good.
And you can sign up for the newsletter, which will tell you when the next classes and things are coming up too. Just trying to find the best way to communicate with people when things are happening.
Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you, Margot.
Thank you, Margot. Yeah, thank you.
This was great fun.
Yeah, everyone have a wonderful day.
Yes.
You as well, Cindy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you, Marco.
Oh, you're very welcome, Bob. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.